Hello, welcome to Government Connection. My name is Vicki Evans. If you were asked to name the greatest threat to the Sonoran Desert, you might say uncontrolled development, climate change, but most experts are agreeing that the real hazard is a plant called buffelgrass. And we're going to learn about this plant, why it's so dangerous, and perhaps what we can do about it as we welcome Dennis Dickerson. Dennis, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure to be here.
And Dennis is the Environmental Planning Coordinator with PAG, which is the Pima Association of Governments. And then we also welcome Irene Ogata. Thank you for being here, Irene. And Irene is an urban landscape manager with the City of Tucson. So again, thank you both for being here. And Dennis, I have to ask, how can a grass be considered so dangerous?
Well, one easy way to think about this is I kind of go back to an early movie from the 1950s, you know, The Blob with Steve McQueen. And you have this kind of small little thing that grows and grows and grows and becomes this, starts taking over a community. And buffelgrass is very much just like that. It's an invasive plant. It's found its way into our community, and it's growing at phenomenal rates. And it's literally taking over the desert.
All right. And the blob, I think, is a very good analogy. And Irene, so, you know, we think of wild plants as being, you know, or wild grasses especially, as being, you know, something to do with the rural environment. And so what about this buffelgrass and urban area competition?
As Dennis alluded to, the blob taking over. That blob is coming into the urban areas as well, and we have our alleyways and our right-of-ways, and even some folks in their front yards think it's a beautiful plant and they're growing it without knowing that it's really quite invasive, and when it starts to flower, it's going to start blowing all over everyone else's yard and transplanting and taking over neighborhoods.
Right, and I gather it is very hardy.
Oh, it's a very hardy plant, and it grows just phenomenally well. It particularly is very vibrant during the monsoon season. That's when it really takes off. And it's only really active and growing for a very short period of time, probably about 3 months of the year. The rest of the time, it's kind of this sort of dead-looking bush. And it's this time of year, it's a very golden color, so it's really distinctive. You can tell it quite easily. But it's all over the sides of roads, and it's starting to come into the neighborhoods.
All right. And we've got something we want to show you, just to show you how much buffelgrass is coming into our area and just how dangerous it can be. So let's take a look.
If undeterred, the invasion by buffelgrass and other flammable non-native species is certainly going to lead to the unhinging of a unique American ecosystem.
I guess it's sort of like a science fiction horror film coming true.
We could have the city in jeopardy with buffelgrass unless we do something about it.
I have never seen anything that comes close to this in terms of a threat to the quality of life that we have.
Buffelgrass threatens to really be the biggest issue that we have.
We're beyond the discussion point. We're beyond the debate point. We're into the action point now.
Buffelgrass evolved in response to drought and heavy grazing in the African savanna and is rapidly invading other subtropical areas of the world. Beginning in the 1930s, this flammable grass was introduced into Texas, Arizona, and Sonora, Mexico to feed cattle and control erosion. Wherever it is planted, buffelgrass eventually escapes along roadsides and into both natural and urban areas. This invasive grass easily outcompetes native shrubs and cacti for space, nutrients, and water, replacing them in just a few years. The grass also poses an immense fire danger, the likes of which the Sonoran Desert has never seen, and the invasion is just getting started.
These are species that have been introduced from other continents, and in their introduction, they've basically escaped their enemies. And when that happens, you tend to grow exponentially.
It doubles every year, which is a realization that is hard to comprehend unless you see what a picture of what it looked like last year, and then can take a look at the same spot this year.
I want to give you the penny example. So you start out with a penny, and every day you actually double that penny. By the end of a month, you're actually a millionaire. You're a millionaire several times over. And that is what's happening with buffelgrass.
If we don't do something now, then everything that we've worked for over the past 10 years, over the past 50 years for many people, dealing with issues of habitat protection and biodiversity, really will be gone practically overnight.
I believe that the spread of buffelgrass is a real threat to the Sonoran Desert landscape and ecosystem, things that make southern Arizona so special.
And in southern Arizona, the community and the economy depend on the environment.
I submit it's not climate that brings people here, it's the desert. We live in one of the most beautiful places on earth.
Tourism contributes roughly $2 billion in revenues to our local economy. It generates about 40,000 jobs in hospitality alone. And in our positioning for the resort, and I would think the positioning of all the resorts in southern Arizona, is based centrally on the environment being the backdrop.
The fact that buffelgrass is now, in some cases, a scar on our mountainsides or on our roadways is certainly going to make an impact on how you view your property or how you potentially view something you might buy.
Unless something is done about this grass, these will be the very last saguaros that we'll ever see on Tumamoc Hill or in the Catalina foothills or the Tucson Mountains.
Saguaro National Park was set aside in 1933 to protect the giant saguaro cactus. This would become a buffelgrass national park instead of a saguaro national park.
The saguaro is the symbol of our community. It's not the symbol of any other community, it's southern Arizona.
The saguaros in particular, they're iconic in what they communicate about the environment. Their shape is majestic and really sets us apart as a unique destination within the tourism market.
Once the desert burns, it's actually not going to recover. If it's in buffelgrass, what's going to come back again is actually buffelgrass. Even without fire, those are the last saguaros on the landscape. With fire, that conversion will happen overnight.
That's because when buffelgrass burns, it burns hot and fast, with flames up to 20 feet high, consuming an area the size of a football field in as little as 3 minutes.
The temperatures that this grass burns at are relatively amazing. So the rest of the grasses, the rest of the plants, typically burn at 600 to 800 degrees, where this is going to be burning 1,300 to 1,400 degrees.
What's worse, the saguaro cactus and other desert plants have no defense against fire. Until now, they haven't needed it.
The Arizona upland portion of the Sonoran Desert is fireproof because of all the bare ground. It's characterized by these wide open spaces of bare ground where you have no fine fuels to carry a fire. Unfortunately, if you look across this landscape, all it would take is one carelessly thrown cigarette butt, and we would have a few hundred acres going up in flames.
When you make the desert really, really flammable, what ends up happening is that you get fires that start in the buffelgrass at the bottom of the mountain that then actually go with a convection upslope. And you start linking fire at the bottom of the mountain with fire at the top where we have our forest. This linking of the fuel is going to have serious, serious impacts.
Fire has become, in the city, has become a real threat and a real issue to us.
The big problem is because of how fast it burns and where it burns, and especially on slopes, in theory we're going to have problems protecting houses. This is a very high value neighborhood. I mean, all the houses are probably close to $1 million. All the houses, for the most part, are surrounded by buffelgrass. It's going to be grab your cat and run for your life. Are we going to?
Hi, I'm Vicki Evans, and this is Government Connection, and we are learning about buffelgrass with two of the people who are knee-deep in grass, trying to educate us all about it and then to eradicate it. And that's Dennis Dickerson with Pima Association of Governments and also Irene Ogata with the City of Tucson. Either one of you, I looked at that grass during that piece, and it is in clumps, which was helpful for me to know. But how do you actually recognize it? You know, I think we've got a comparison here that we can show you of just some native grasses in southern Arizona, and then also, you know, compared to a bufflegrass. So when I tell people that that bufflegrass is a problem, or people know about it, they say, but you know, I can't recognize it. So maybe you could give us some tips.
Okay. First off, it grows in clumps, as you said, so it's very distinctive. It's just this little bunch of grass. It's normally not much over 3 to 4 feet high. It's often more like 2 to 2.5 feet high, and especially in neighborhoods and when it's first starting out. During this time of year, it's a golden brown. It's kind of a messy looking plant. It doesn't stick straight up like fountain grass. It's very messy. It's got all the little leaves kind of are intertwined.
They're floppy a little then.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
And then in the summer, during the monsoon season, when it greens up, it's a very bright, either emerald or like Kelly green. It's very distinctive in that sense.
All right.
I think the other thing that you can tell about bufflegrass, when it is flowering and when it is green, it does look a little bit like green fountain grass. But if you touch it and you scrape your fingers along it, it has a little sandy feel to it.
On the stem?
On the stem and the leaves.
Okay.
So it's not a very smooth feeling plant. And even today, while it's brown, you can run your finger on it and it'll have that sandy feel to it.
Right. Has earlier, you know, it was mentioned that bufflegrass was introduced to the United States, what, in the 30s. What about Arizona? I mean, has this just blossomed into a problem within the last 5 or 10 years, or were we grazing cattle on it a long time ago?
It's been used in certain areas, but it's really become a serious problem to the Tucson region in the last 5 to 10 years. And it's certainly taking off. And in fact, it's actually in the front range now of the Catalinas in the foothills. That's where some of our most serious problems are, and that's where rural metro is particularly concerned. And if you go up on Kolb Road, north of River, you can actually see a lot of bufflegrass actually starting to encroach all throughout the area.
Right.
The biggest transport, I would say, of bufflegrass is cars. That's why you see them quite a bit along the roadsides. And then Texas and New Mexico have been using it for grazing, for livestock. Arizona has not. They have used it experimentally, but not regularly. Sonora, Mexico has replaced a lot of their grasslands with bufflegrass. So again, it's those cars, and the seed heads get stuck in the tires, and that's how it starts to spread.
I'll be darned. Okay. And we are talking and learning about bufflegrass, and if you'd like to learn more and see the video in its entirety, we only showed you about 5 minutes, and I think it runs about 10. Please check out the website, and it's bufflegrass.org. And while we're at it, we want to tell you about a cleanup, right, and an eradication effort that the volunteers and the public are invited to. It's Saturday, February 7th, and if you could give us the particulars on that, either Dennis or Irene.
Sure. This is the second annual event that we've had, and all throughout the year there are volunteers in various groups who are meeting and pulling out bufflegrass all throughout the year. But this is a very special day because it's on a single day. We try to get as many people as possible to remove as much bufflegrass as possible on a single day. Last year we had well over 200 volunteers. We removed 4,000 plants, and we're certainly on track to be as good or better again this year.
Where's the area? Where are you going to do it?
There's a number of different locations, and if you go to bufflegrass.org, you'll be able to actually volunteer right online and click on the location that you want, or you can choose your own neighborhood and indicate that as well. But some of the specific areas are Tucson Mountain Park, the Saguaro National Park West, and the area around Pantano and Irvington, A Mountain. Those are just a few of the locations.
Okay. And, you know, Irene, what have we done in the past? You love the we, but to manage bufflegrass?
Well, a lot of it has been, from the public sector side, probably the spraying. But that only can occur during, as Dennis had said, a short period of time when it's green.
Oh.
So the spraying. But I think one of the most amazing groups is the weed whackers, and they've been doing Tucson Mountain Parks for what, over 5 years, or is it even 10 years? And they've eradicated quite a bit of the bufflegrass in Tucson Mountain.
Is that just by literally keeping it cut? They're not pulling it out by the roots?
They're pulling it out.
They are
yes,
pulling it out.
They're doing manual labor out there.
Is that what it takes, do you think, ultimately?
You have to go back to an area frequently because there's a natural, or the seeds are still there even after you pull the plant. So there's about a 3-year window where it does make a huge difference. You can come back in and it's a lot easier to deal with after you do that first clean out. It's an extremely rewarding experience too. I've been out there and doing it, and it's kind of like you come into an area and you see this massive buffalo grass and you're saying to yourself, this is just absolutely horrible. It has to be removed. So you get out there, you remove it, and at the end of the day, you've cleared out an area, and it's a very refreshing experience because you feel like you've really changed the environment. You've really made a difference.
Right. And anybody who weeds, and I do weed, I hate it, as probably we all do, but there is that feeling of, whoa, when you're done. You know, you feel a little bit like this. You know, that you really accomplished something.
That's right.
That's correct.
I was just curious, Irene, you talked about, we're talking about managing it and pulling it out's the best, and as you said, you got to keep at it.
Right.
Does cattle help, does grazing help keep it down at all? Is that a tactic you might use in the rural areas?
Arizona, it has been declared a noxious weed, and so they can't transport it into Arizona, the state itself. So we're not using it for cattle fodder.
Gotcha.
So I would say no.
Right,
and it doesn't have that much nutrient value either.
Okay.
So that's a limiting factor as well.
So the two are actually spraying and pulling.
Now, when you spray, is that a spray that's been developed that's directly,
it's just
good for that?
regular Roundup.
So you could kill other things that are there also. You'd have to be pretty careful.
That's correct.
Have to know what you're doing. Right. Oh,
right.
Okay. So we're talking about what can be done. How would you assess what kind of impact can we make today? What or even can we make an impact? Is it going to growing faster than we can get ourselves out there to pull it?
I think, again, if we look at what the weed whackers did with Tucson Mountain, that's a great illustration what can be done and what they have done. And they do have to go back repeatedly to do it, and that's all volunteer-based. And they're doing it today, and Sabino Canyon is now doing it. They've picked up their own weed whacker section, as has Tanca Verde, and neighborhood groups are doing it all the time.
Right. But that's not to say that that alone is going to solve the problem. It is an infestation, and it's growing rapidly. And so significant effort has to be made. Part of Beatback Bufflegrass Day is really to mobilize the community, to make sure everyone understands that there's this problem out there and that they can individually do something about it. Right now, the number of volunteers really is just a handful. What we really need is an army of volunteers. Right. And we can start to make significant inroads.
Okay. And in case you tuned in late or have forgotten, I'd just like to remind everyone, including myself, why is it so dangerous? We're talking a lot about the fire hazard. It burns at a high temperature. It burns rapidly. But what else is it doing as we speak?
It's slowly destroying our Sonoran Desert. The iconic saguaros, the other cactus. Because what it does is it grows in those clumps, and it will take over the landscape. It will also hide the sun from small growing plants, and it basically takes over the ground so that other plants can't take root. And it's a slow process, but eventually, if you don't check bufflegrass, if you don't remove it, it's simply going to replace the native desert that we have with just a sea of bufflegrass.
What's sort of amazing is if you look toward Tumamoc Hill, or a mountain that has been covered with bufflegrass, what you will not see is the wildflowers that used to bloom on those hilltops. They're not able to bloom anymore because the bufflegrass has taken over the spots where the wildflowers usually grow.
Right, so you just lose everything else.
That's correct.
And I'm bringing something that I've read or heard, bringing it from the recesses of my mind, always a dangerous place, but it's very hard to reintroduce native species once they're gone. Is that right? I mean, once it's been cleared out by let's say, bufflegrass, and to eradicate that and to reintroduce is a more difficult process, right?
It's certainly challenging, but the good news is that where bufflegrass has been removed, native species are coming back. So that's very positive.
They're finding their way back.
Yes.
That is good. What does it like particular soil? I mean, I think I already know the answer. If it likes the foothills and the roadway on Pima, let's say, you know, just the side of the road on Pima, which is in, you know, just central Tucson, it pretty much likes anywhere, I'd imagine.
That is correct. It'll grow in the alleyways, in washes, in bad soils, in good soils. It'll thrive. In some areas, when I saw Travis, when I first met Travis about 3 years ago, going up to Tumamoc Hill, some of that bufflegrass was maybe 3.5 feet tall, and because they have been thriving up there. And so any kind of soil.
Right.
Yeah.
Talk about an opportunist, huh?
And it particularly likes disturbed soil. So areas that have been graded, for example, for development, but not yet developed.
Great little
you can go all
incubator,
over, all over the region and find those vacant lots filled with bufflegrass.
All right. And we do have a caller. Leslie, what's your question or comment?
Hello. I'd like to know, how deep do you have to dig to get to the root of this plant or this weed?
Okay.
It's not that deep. It goes about 6 inches is about what you'd really have to get at. But you use this sort of a digging bar, and you dig. You know, you pull it in there, and basically you kind of lever out the plant, and it just pops right out. The whole thing.
Does.
Does it have a tap root, or is it a bunch of more fine roots?
Or a bunch of roots. Yeah.
All right. So you're saying a bar. You can't just use a.
Well, you can use like a pickaxe or something like that, or even a shovel. But the bar is particularly good because you can get it in there and just really lever it out.
Okay.
So it's very easy.
Right.
If you go after a rain and the soil's moist, you know, it's easier to pull out, and sometimes you don't even need the bar.
Right. That's with any plant in Tucson, I have to admit. And may I ask, once you were, you know, when you talked about that other cleanup that was so big and so effective, you know, once you clean this up, do you burn it? I mean, is that the way you're getting rid of it, or?
Well, right now, most of the time it's being bagged and taken to a landfill, and in some cases where it's being removed and it's just simply let's say in the back country, then it's put into clumps, rocks are placed on it, it's allowed to just naturally degrade. Conceivably it could be burned, but you'd run into a lot of different environmental issues there.
Right, and I was just thinking it kind of likes heat, so it
Right.
might, that was really I wasn't using my thinking cap there.
Burning it sometimes is not very good, as what they're finding in Abra Valley. Tucson Water has farm fields that are now dormant, that's covered with bufflegrass, and they found that if you burn it, they just come back twice as much the next year.
Yeah, it's part of the natural ecology of bufflegrass for it to burn. And so it helps to clear the area of other plants so it can come back and there's nothing to compete with it. And so it just goes that much more quickly.
Right. I thought it was an interesting point that I learned from the video, is that desert plants don't have they haven't developed natural fire protection because it was never necessary in the environment in which they grew.
Cactus doesn't burn. And so you're introducing fire to an environment which has been free of fire, and the impact is simply that much more devastating as a result.
Right. So cactus doesn't burn?
Nope.
Gee, and I call myself a desert rat. I didn't know that.
So what sort of happens, because the fire is so hot for the cactus, and the saguaro in particular, that holds a lot of water, it sort of boils the plant up, you know, and so that kills the plant.
Right. You know, we talked to foothills, it's everywhere. Where would you say is the greatest concern in our area, our Tucson Valley?
Well, probably, again, if you look at the foothills, it's covered with it, and then as they showed in the video, just the homes, and then in the urban areas, it's the vacant lots, and then the closer it gets to the home, the more of a hot fire hazard it is. So in urban areas, I would say that's number one, again, because if you get a house on fire, that can have a domino effect and repercussions.
We were just, now are these gold clumps we're seeing in these photos? That's the bufflegrass.
The golden looking plant is the bufflegrass, and as you can see, it grows in like areas, and what'll happen is that over time, that's a very good photograph right there, and it'll simply keep expanding out And unless it's dealt with, it'll get right up next to your houses.
So those saguaros, their number could be up that are being encompassed by that.
Yes.
If a fire started, yes.
Okay. But new growth from those saguaros would also is probably out. I know saguaros grow very slowly, but I mean, they're not going to grow right. They wouldn't have a chance in that bufflegrass.
The bufflegrass is competing against those saguaros, and it's going to make it very difficult for new saguaros to grow.
Right, right. So let's talk some more about volunteer efforts. You know, you said it's been so effective, Irene, for neighborhoods to get together, and I think it's a good time also to show the website again. Is that, can people just sign up for all year round kind of?
The good one about the Beat Back Bufflegrass Day is it is on the PAG site, and anybody can sign up for that. And Dennis has been really great about directing where those volunteers and what sites are there. The Weed Whackers, if you go to the bufflegrass.org site, the Weed Whackers have monthly pulls. And then there are other organizations that also have monthly pulls, as well as folks in the Saguaro National Park. They've been having those as well. The neighborhood groups have been just organizing themselves and doing it. So if there's someone in a neighborhood that's interested, they can either contact me, or Tucson Clean and Beautiful also has been very helpful in organizing those efforts.
Right. So let's just show once more. Beat Back the...
Beat Back Bufflegrass Day.
Beat Back, oh boy.
It's a tongue twister.
But a good, it's catchy. Beat Back Bufflegrass, and you can get started by finding all the great sources that Irene and Dennis are talking about at bufflegrass.org. And remember, there's an upcoming kind of hopefully citywide event that'll be sent out, groups volunteering will be sent out to different areas to pull grass on Saturday, February 7th. So please go to bufflegrass.org.
And actually, that is a region-wide.
Oh, it's region-wide.
Yes. So Sahuarita,
Marana, Oro Valley are engaged in it as well. And Saddlebrook has got a group that they're forming.
Great. And it's that kind of effort.
It is a region-wide problem.
Right. You know, we only have about 30 seconds, 45 seconds left. Are there other invasive plants? Are we, you know, just kind of waiting to come in, or do we need to stay vigilant if we win the bufflegrass?
We'll probably need to stay vigilant from any number of different threats to the environment. But this is certainly the most immediate and absolutely the most dangerous, and has to be dealt with as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
That's correct. And there are some other invasive weeds, but probably right now we're focusing on bufflegrass as number one.
All right. So we thank you so much for joining us, and this has been Government Connection. And I think it really is high time we can recognize saguaros. Maybe it's high time we learn to recognize bufflegrass. So thank you all so very, very much.
Thank you.
And especially thank you to
Thank you.
Dennis and Irene. Thank you.